Welcome, everyone, to Real Estate 360 Live. I'm your host, Ryan Sloper. For those of you who are not familiar with the show, my guests and I will cover every angle of real estate under the sun, from interest rates to the economy to what's happening in Washington. Anything that affects real estate in our local area. If you have credit issues, you can call me. If you want to refinance at the lowest rates in U.S. history, call me. You've got questions and I've got the answers. Make sure you join us every Monday at WNEW 1580 AM from 2 to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Please call me with any questions at 877-245-2030. That's 877-245-2030. Remember, if it's real estate, it's covered here. Later, we'll discuss Robert Shiller, who is part of the Shiller Index, and his comments on the real estate market and whether he believes it's actually bottomed out or not. Also, later in the show, we are going to give you proper instructions if you're receiving or giving a gift as a down payment for somebody trying to purchase a property. We want to make sure that you do this properly so that you don't end up ruining your loan transaction. And in the last segment, we're going to go into our typical credit fix segment where we basically are going to divulge to you what credit inquiries can do to hurt you when you're trying to obtain a loan. Joining me on our panel today is Cammarosano, the general manager of HomeGain. He is a regular contributor to the show. Louis is often cited in the media as an industry expert in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, CNN Money, Fox Business, Smart Money, MSN, and numerous others. I want to jump into, it was an interesting article, and I believe this was in the Business Insider. It was an interview between Henry Blodgett and Robert Shiller. For those of you who are not familiar with Robert Shiller, he is a Yale professor and who has correctly identified in advance two major price bubbles in the recent decades. One was the stock market bubble in the late 1990s, and the other was the housing bubble of the late 2000s. So one of the first questions that he was asked by Henry Blodgett was, a lot of people who have just called the bottom in the housing market in the United States, and there's been some okay data recently. Is that your take? That finally housing prices are bottoming? Shiller's response was, when people phrase it that way, they say we've reached the bottom. That suggests that we have the expectation of a major turning point right now, but I don't see that. I don't see any reason to think that prices are going to start heading up dramatically now. We do have some good news. Permits are up. Notably, the National Association of Home Builders Housing Market Index is up, and that's a forward-looking index, but it's not up very much. If you look at the rate of change, it looks dramatic, but it is still at a low level. So these comments are, in a way, to me, they're still very pessimistic about overall the housing market and where it's headed. Now, with that being said, I think that, he's looking at things more on a national level, okay? And I tell you guys every Monday that you have to make sure that you're focusing on your real estate market in your local area. Real estate is hyper local and very sensitive, literally from one neighborhood to the next. So just because you're seeing headlines such as, housing is bottoming out, or has it bottomed out, or where is it headed? It's getting worse. You have to make sure that you're talking to professionals. Professionals are the only ones that are, they're professionals in geographic areas, meaning like the DC metro area. You need to make sure that it's somebody that's working in this area that knows the locations, knows the real estate market in your subdivision, in your city, in your zip code, and can give you the necessary advice to make sure that you're making sound real estate decisions, whether you're buying real estate, whether you're selling, whether you're looking to rent, whether you're looking to refinance your existing loan. It's important that you're working with somebody that knows all of this information. I know a lot of people get caught up in looking online for, to find out house values. And while you can get some decent advice on there, it'll show you some comparable sales and whatnot, it's still not giving you the exact information that a professional could give you. Best thing to do is to reach out, 877-245-2030. That's 877-245-2030. My advice, my opinion on, whether the market is bottomed. In the DC metro area, it 100% had hit the bottom a while ago. We've seen actually an increase of prices over the last year and a half to 2 years. With interest rates remaining low, I see this actually, we're actually getting more of a spark. I've actually had a lot of agents that I've spoken with over the last couple of weeks tell me in certain areas of Arlington, Virginia, Alexandria, Virginia, Fairfax, Virginia, that prices are increasing. We're actually back into the multiple offer situation where you have a property on the market for a day or so, and then all of a sudden 10 contracts come in. Now, I know you're probably saying to yourself in your head, well, is this just a repeat of what we had in the late 2000s where, people were foreclosing because they were paying too much for a house, getting a mortgage over their head, and, couldn't maintain those payments? I'm not saying that that's the case, because now housing is actually a lot more affordable now. And I think that that's why we're seeing a lot more competitiveness and people bidding up prices on homes, because they're trying to get out of the renting situation to get into where they can purchase a house to take advantage of the tax benefits, locking in the future cost of home ownership long term for 30 years. So I do think in the DC metro area that we have really, we're on the upswing. Now, how long can that hold? I'm not really sure. And it depends a lot on, I think, where interest rates stay. I think that it's probably safe to say, since the Fed is planning on keeping the Fed fund rate low for the next 2 years plus, that mortgage rates will probably tend to stay relatively low. I'm going to say they're going to probably trade in a range of anywhere from, 3.75 to 4.5% over the next 2 years. At any rate, I think that it is probably a smart, sound decision to consider buying now. I think that you have so much to gain by doing that now, just because it's not worth gambling 1/8%, 1/4% to think that interest rates are going to go down further. And in the DC metro area, prices have been rising, so any decrease in rate will be offset by an increase in price on the other side. 877-245-2030. That's 877-245-2030. If you are currently in a position where you think you can buy a home and you just want some advice and you need somebody to talk to figure out what your short and long-term goals are and get a plan. Maybe your credit is struggling right now and you need somebody to talk to figure out, get a game plan together to find out when you can buy. Maybe you can't buy today. Maybe it's not tomorrow. Maybe it's not next month, but maybe it's 3 to 6 months down the road. If you start by getting a game plan today, we can get you on the path to home ownership. Now, remember, I say that not everybody is cut out to be a homeowner. However, I would say that the trend is that there's a lot of make sense situations now where people are currently renting, where the rent has been increasing year over year, and it's going to continue to do that over the next few years, in my opinion, just due to inflation, the supply and demand issues that we have in the DC metro area. It's very competitive. We have a lot of government jobs, a lot of people moving into the area. So I think that it is a safe bet to buy a property if you plan on living here for the next 5 to 10 years. Reach out to me at realestate360live.com. Make sure you click the button, ask a question, enter in your contact information. I'd be glad to get back with you. The next question that Henry had asked Robert Shiller was, one thing that people are saying is that we have finally absorbed the excess inventory, and with just the general growth of the population and families in the United States, we're getting close to where we're meeting supply and demand. Is that true? Schiller's response was, well, one simple model of home prices is the construction cost model. Traditionally, home values about 15% land and 85% construction cost. The land component has gotten bigger with the bubble. That might be kind of a long-run equilibrium. If you believe that that's an oversimplified model, then it probably suggests we'll just stay where we are. Now, I think that especially in the DC metro area, we've actually seen, home building and new homes actually pick up substantially. A lot of these subdivisions are selling out well in advance, getting, multiple contracts. The prices, I believe I actually had a client last year that bought a property, a new home in the 420 range, and almost like less than a year later, that same exact model is back up to around 470. So, that's over a 10% increase in less than a year. So things are definitely moving. He definitely thinks, though, that, that overall on a national outlook, that things are pretty much going to stay where they're at. So you're going to have some markets, your New York, Virginia, DC, areas that are very good with, plentiful with jobs. They're going to stay strong, and probably prices are going to rise in those areas. And you're going to have others, which in the, some areas in the Midwest and stuff where there's not as many jobs, probably home values are going to stay the same, if not come down. Florida, Nevada, those areas will probably continue to decline. So on the average, I see him saying stay the same, probably so on a national level, but I'm more focused on here in the DC metro area. And I think that you should be too, because that's where you're living now. realistically, I think that values will continue to increase through this year and through the next year. Obviously, there will be spring markets, summer markets, and fall and winter markets, but I just think that with interest rates being 4% or less, when I'm running these comparisons of what it costs to rent the same type of home versus what the mortgage payment would be with a nominal down payment, let's just say it's a government loan of 3.5% down, most of the times it's working out to where owning a home is just as cheap, if not cheaper, than renting. And that's a win-win situation. So if you are in that situation now and you're currently trying to figure out, what the best course of action may be, reach out to us at 877-245-2030. That's 877-245-2030, and I will personally advise you. We're coming up on a break, but when we come back, there was an interesting article in the Washington Post on angry about income inequality and don't blame the rich. Make sure you stay tuned. Be right back.